So welcome everyone to another in the series of Transforming Assessment, where we look at the implications of changes in our current technology environment and how that's going to impact on assessment in education. Today we have a very special guest, that's Andrew Ng, who's the director of the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab, Stanford University, and also co-founder of Coursera. And of course we're very pleased that Andrew's been able to be with us today. Andrew is obviously very well known throughout the world, both for his research work in artificial intelligence and also for the work on MOOCs and the open education area. So Andrew, I shall hand over to you now to do the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Mathew, and thank you everyone for joining us on this call. So, as Mathew mentioned, I'm a Stanford professor and co-founder of Coursera. Most people today will never have access to a Stanford course, but we're changing that. Working with such great universities around the world as Stanford, Princeton, Caltech, Yale, Columbia, as well as universities outside the U.S., such as the University of Edinburgh, Chinese University of Hong Kong, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Melbourne, University of Melbourne in Australia, and many others. We're taking courses from all of these great universities and putting them online free for anyone to take. We're using technology to offer high-quality education at scale. I was told that some of you might be from low-bandwidth connections, so I'm going to turn off the video. So today, 30 of the top 60 universities worldwide, including the number 1 or 2 or both in 14 different countries, are working with Coursera to create free online courses. So, as many of you are instructors, let me also share with you my story. As a professor at Stanford, I used to teach a 400-student Stanford class. The MOOC movement started about 2 years ago when I put my class online, and it reached an audience of 100,000 students. To put that number in context, for me to reach a comparable size audience, I would otherwise have had to teach my normal Stanford class for 250 years. Who were the students? It was students like Jenny, who wrote to say that as a 39-year-old single mother of 2, she had been wanting to return to college, and the convenience of an online class allowed her to do the first step. And it was students like Akash, who wrote to say that coming from a small middle-class family in India, he would otherwise never have had access to a Stanford class. Since I launched my first class almost 2 years ago, we've grown substantially, and today Coursera has partnered with over 80 universities, has now over 400 courses, and over 4 million students. So, And today, Coursera is, of course, by far the largest MOOC or massive open online courses platform in the world. So why do so many students want to take our courses? I think it is that, first and foremost, these are real courses. Each course begins on a certain day. It then runs for a fixed period of time. So this is a plot of my class, the first MOOC offered out of Stanford, as the class ran over a span of 10 weeks. The vertical axis is the number of users on the site, and the horizontal axis is time, and those heartbeats, those regular peaks spaced 1 week apart, are homework deadlines. And so predictably, the 24 hours before a homework is due, web traffic spikes, thus proving, I think, that procrastination is a global phenomenon. And if a student enrolls in the class, participates in it by watching the lectures every week online and doing the homework every week, then if they do the homeworks and meet our high grading bar, they also receive a certificate that they can put in their resume, and which many students are already using to successfully find a better job. So let me show you, I know that many of you have heard about MOOCs, but let me show you a bit of what the student experience looks like. Let's see, like many others, we use video-based instruction. Unfortunately, Blackboard Collaborate doesn't support video, so I'm not able to show you a clip of what a lecture video looks like. But most of our lectures are short video chunks that look a little bit like Khan Academy videos. It would be one example. We have other videos of an instructor speaking to the camera as a talking head or doing interviews. We have videos of instructors going out into the field to do field work, and we shoot videos of that. But we have many different forms of video, and rather than posting hour-long videos of an instructor talking or delivering a long lecture, we further encourage instructors to take concepts and break them down into, say, 10-minute bite-sized pieces. Thus, the course content is posted online by a sequence of many short, maybe 5, maybe 10-minute videos. By breaking the content down into short videos, this allows students to learn in bite-sized pieces. It also allows the instructor to post optional prerequisites and optional advanced material. This allows the students to navigate the content in their own order and at their own pace, thus moving us away from the one-size-fits-all model of education. But a class is much more than just lectures, and we know that students learn best not by passively listening, but by practicing with the material. In other words, it is often the homeworks. That's where the real learning takes place. In the study shown here, it was shown that retrieval practice, that is, being tested on the material, that resulted in substantially higher long-term retention than study or even repeated study. Because of this, we've built pervasively into our software platform many opportunities for students to practice with the material. Unfortunately, the video clip for this doesn't work on Blackboard Collaborate, but if I'll describe it verbally, imagine, if you will, that you're watching a lecture video on a website. Partway through the video, maybe 5 minutes into a 10-minute video, maybe the instructor will ask you, the viewer, a question. What happens at that point is that right in the middle of that 5-minute video, the video will pause and the question will pop up. You get to attempt an answer, and you get instant feedback on whether or not you answered, say, the multiple choice or the short answer or some other question correctly. Now, if you contrast the experience I just described with sitting in a large lecture hall, I guess I've taught at Stanford for over a decade, and my experience is that when I ask a question in my classroom, usually half of the class is still madly scribbling away trying to write down the last thing I said, and invariably there's that, one smart kid sitting in the first row that just blurts out an answer, then I feel really good that someone answered my question and the class moves on with only one student having gotten to engage with the question. In contrast, when you're watching a lecture video on a website, the video pauses and the quiz pops up, and every student gets to attempt an answer. Every student gets instant feedback on whether or not they're understanding the material. This slide shows some examples of the questions that we have. Most of these examples can be embedded right in the middle of a lecture video. So you can imagine a video talking about the history of science, and maybe right in the middle of the lecture, the video can pause and you can pop up a question that says, who discovered the theory of general relativity? So far, my verbal description has just been of the in-video quizzes, which is this idea of letting instructors ask every student a question right in the middle of a lecture. Most of our classes also have more serious weekly homeworks that often take students hours to complete. So that after watching, say, a couple hours of lectures, broken down into 5-10-minute pieces, the student might then spend another few hours working on more serious homeworks. Our website supports short answer questions, shown in the upper left. It supports mathematical questions. It actually understands different mathematical formulas. We can do computer programming exercises. In the example on the lower left, the student is asked to write a computer program, and the student can write their program right there into the web browser, and our software can auto-grade the student's computer program and check the student's code for correctness. And we can also do computer grading of arbitrary structured output. So a spreadsheet, as one example of that, a spreadsheet is an example of a structured output. So you can imagine a class where the students are asked to, say, build a financial model in a spreadsheet and upload the spreadsheet to be graded by a computer. And the student can get instant feedback on whether the, say, financial model that they built is an accurate one. I see. And I apologize. I just realized I think I had some slides that were hidden slides, but Blackboard Collaborate is taking all the hidden slides and turning them into slides not visible. So if you see me skip over a few slides, I apologize. That's Blackboard Collaborate sharing slides that were previously hidden. So one of the nice things about auto-grading is that you can allow students to make multiple attempts at a piece of work. So previously, or in a normal university course, if a student does a piece of work and they get it wrong, well, what can you do? They get back their graded homework and the class moves on. But one of the, and that has to be the way it is for most on-campus classes because we have the resources to grade a piece of work only once. In contrast, a website has the resources to allow a student to attempt a piece of work multiple times, and we can auto-grade a student's piece of work multiple times and give the student instant feedback each time. And this is a technique called mastery learning, in which rather than having students take work that they only partially understand and then be forced to move on to the next piece of the class, we instead encourage students to come back and attempt a piece of work over and over until they get it correct, so that they have a more firm foundation to build on before they move on to the next piece of work. So we don't want students to attempt exactly the same piece of work, or to attempt exactly the same homework question. So what we do is we provide tools to instructors to make it easy for them to generate randomized questions. In this example, the instructor has posed the question and written 4 correct and 4 incorrect options. The first time a student attempts a question, our system randomly selects 2 correct and 2 incorrect answers, and they might see the quiz question on the upper right. If the student doesn't get it quite right, they go home, study a bit more, and come back and try again, and they see a different version. And if they still don't get it right, they come back and try again for a 3rd time. So by doing this, it allows students multiple attempts to understand the material. With this technique called mastery learning, it gives every student multiple chances to succeed and allows every student multiple chances to have a firm foundation to build on before they move on to the next piece of material. Our studies, our partners and us have done studies on the effect of mastery learning. This is a result from Martin Odersky's class at EPFL. And shown on the upper left is the histogram of student scores on the first submission versus the last submission. And you see that the histogram of scores moves from the blue histogram to the green histogram, and thus it's nice to confirm that by letting students submit multiple times, their scores improve. But what is even more interesting is that if, say, you attempt homework 3 multiple times, so that you get, maybe on your first attempt at homework 3, you got a score of 65, and when you try again, you got a score of 68. So you got a 3-point improvement by engaging in mastery learning. What the data from this EPF Lausanne class showed was that for students that engage in mastery learning, a 3-point improvement in, say, problem set 3 results in, on average, a 1-point improvement in your very first attempt on the following problem set. And so I think this helps to maybe validate the hypothesis that mastery learning gives students a more firm foundation to build on, and therefore results in better performance in later parts of the class as well. So far, I've been talking about auto-graded homework, computer-graded homework, which has the advantage of being able to give students instant feedback. But not everything can be computer-graded. If, for example, you want to teach a poetry class, I guess I learned an interesting lesson about a year ago, almost a year and a half ago, when I was visiting the University of Pennsylvania. I learned that if you go to a poetry professor and you show this poetry professor your, shiny new multiple choice auto-grading technology, and if you try to convince this poetry professor to teach a poetry class using only multiple choice, I learned that the poetry professor will invite you to exit his office. So, in order to allow instructors to assign more open-ended homework, such as to have students write a 300-word essay on a piece of poetry, write an essay critiquing some event in history. We needed a way to get homework like that corrected and graded. Now, if you have 100,000 students in class, well, one professor cannot grade 100,000 essays, but what we can do is have the students grade each other's essays. So there's this idea in education called peer grading, which is exactly this idea that you can have the students grade each other's work. Peer grading has been shown in small classes to give fairly accurate grades, and moreover, self-grading, in which students are asked to grade their own work, is even more accurate and is also pedagogically useful. And this is maybe validated in the figure on the right, where the student-assigned grade shown on the vertical axis is highly correlated with the teacher-assigned grade shown on the horizontal axis. So what we did was we took this idea of peer grading, previously applied only in small classes, and combined it with the computer science idea of crowdsourcing, and today would run by far the largest peer-graded cohorts in the history of education. The way it worked is, as a student in one of these classes, you would be asked to first do the work, say write an essay. Or in this example, students were asked to do a design problem and build a physical artifact and take a picture of what they had built and upload a picture of what they had built of the design process on the website, so that the picture that they uploaded can then be graded by other students. But so the process is, and these three examples are actual homework submissions from actual students in a class. But from the student experience processes, you would be asked to first do the work. Maybe write an essay, or take a picture, or build something, take a picture, and upload the picture. After having done so, you would then be trained to grade other students' work. We supply a grading guideline that teaches you how to grade other students' work. Every student is then asked to demonstrate proficiency in grading. So show us that you can assign grades similar to what the instructor had assigned on a small sample of homework that the instructor had also graded. And finally, having demonstrated proficiency in grading, every student is required to grade, say, 5 other students' pieces of work, and in exchange, you get feedback from 5 other students about the quality of your own work. So, studies done by us and our university partners. This slide shows a study done by Princeton Professor Hillier and his team, has shown that peer grading at scale works. In this example, Professor Hillier showed that the peer-assigned score shown on the vertical axis is again highly correlated with the teacher-assigned score, and other studies done by us or by other university partners have obtained similar results. So I think what we've managed to show, what we and our partners have managed to show, is that peer grading at scale, I want to say it assigns fairly accurate grades, and it also certainly gives very useful qualitative feedback to students in the form of text comments that students write to other students. And I've heard from students that have participated in peer grading, and it turns out many of them love being able to do this because you get to see other students' work, and you get to give feedback to others about their work, and you get to be a bit of a teacher as well as a student. So peer grading, together with our auto-grading technology, has been key to enabling us to offer a broad range of courses that span the humanities, the social sciences, engineering, business, law, finance, and other areas. I think peer grading in particular was an innovation that I'm particularly proud of, and it was really the key technology that enabled us to broaden MOOCs out to the humanities, business, law, finance, medicine, and such areas. So I've talked about the student experience from the perspective of the lectures and the homework. The third and final major component of the student experience is the community. Coursera serves a very diverse, non-traditional population. 80% of our students already have a bachelor's degree, and the student population is 35% US, 28% Europe, 21% Asia, 9% South America, 4% Africa. About 33% of our students today come from developing economies. When you have 100,000 students, one thing that the professor cannot do is answer every single student's questions. Because, well, one professor cannot answer that many students' questions. But one of the nice things about having students from all around the world is that it means that no matter what time, if a student has a question, then no matter what time of day you have that question, there will be someone in some time zone awake at the same time as you, thinking about the same thing, that can discuss it with you. So rather than trying to get one professor to answer 100,000 students' questions, we instead developed a discussion forum that enables students to post questions and allows other students to answer their questions. So we try to have students answer each other's questions. When we first measured it in my class, what we found was that if a student posts a question, usually there will be a response written by another student within a few minutes. The median response time in these classes was 22 minutes. And I think, having to wait 22 minutes for a response to your question is, I think, a very good level of service. It's certainly a better level of service than I ever offered to my on-campus Stanford students. Let's see. Beyond the online community, we found that many physical communities have sprung up all around the world as well, with physical study groups forming in many different countries, with groups organized by geography or language or lifestyle. There was a class, an intro to programming class. There was an online meetup organized by single mothers learning to code. And we're finding that students are getting together all around the world to support each other in taking these courses as well. So I'll talk about the student experience, the lectures, the homeworks, and the community. And finally, from the student experience perspective, we also give students an opportunity to earn a certificate if they complete the homeworks and meet our high grading bar. One of the other innovations that I'm most proud of for Coursera is a program that we rolled out called Signature Track. So one of the problems with online education is if someone signs up for a class, you don't really have any way of knowing who they are and if they really are the one that took the class. In the Signature Track program, what we do is we ask students to show us their photo IDs, so their driver's license or passport or similar, so that we can associate their name to their, so that we know their real name and we know what they look like. Then, if you're a student in this class, every time you submit a piece of homework, we use a technology called keystroke biometrics. So I guess my former professional background is I used to work and still do, I guess, work in computer science and machine learning at Stanford. One of the technologies I had worked in back then in my academic life was keystroke biometrics, which is this idea that your typing pattern or your typing rhythm is unique to you. It is like a fingerprint. So you can't type the way that I do, and I can't type the way that you do, even if we try. So using that technology that I had worked on previously, we rolled out, I should say many groups around the world have worked on previously, we rolled out keystroke biometrics so that every time you submit a homework, we use a combination of taking your picture, using your webcam, as well as asking you to provide a typing sample so that we can verify whether or not it really is you sitting at the keyboard submitting a piece of work. On that basis, through the Signature Track program, we now know that it really was you that submitted the work, and on that basis, we are then issuing to students these verified certificates that students are putting in their resume, and in many cases, anecdotally, but in many, many anecdotal cases, that students are successfully using to find a better job. It turns out that these are hard classes commensurate with the high academic standards of Coursera's partner universities, and thus I think when a student successfully completes one of these classes, it is a very strong signal, that to potential employers that of all the things this student could be doing, for some reason they chose to spend their time doing these really difficult classes, and that's a very strong signal to potential employers that this is a candidate worth seriously considering. One of the nice things about teaching a class with 100,000 students is the data that you can collect. I guess once again, perhaps this comes from my professional, maybe my former professional background in machine learning and big data, but analyzing statistics is basically what I had built my professional career on prior to starting Coursera. And the data, and I've learned working in online education, that the data you can collect is unprecedented. Here's what I mean. If you have an educational study, in a typical education study, maybe you get to test your idea out on 20 or maybe 200 students. Whereas if you're teaching on Coursera, if you have an idea in pedagogy that you want to test, you can easily roll out your idea to 20,000 students in an experiment group and 20,000 students in a control group. And as many of you know, sometimes just having a much larger number of students to test your ideas on results in you seeing things that you otherwise would not. But it's more than just the sheer number of students. It is also the detail of data. On the website, we log every mouse click, we log every keystroke, we log every homework submission, correct or incorrect. If a student fast-forwarded through part of the video, or if a student did an instant replay, rewound part of the video, we know that too. If you post a question on the discussion forum, and we know who responds to your question, we know what time you read their response, and we know how that affected your homework performance on the next problem set. So the detail and magnitude of data we can collect is unprecedented in the history of education. Over the last year, I think Coursera has collected more educational data than probably the entire academic field of education over the entire 5,000-year history of the academic field of education. And this data is, I hope, giving us into a new window into human learning. Let me give you a couple of examples of things we've been able to do. One of the debates we had at Stanford was, should you put an instructor's face in the lower right-hand corner of the video? The debates went back and forth endlessly. One hypothesis was that putting the instructor's face there, like on the left, allows students to form a deeper sense of connection with the instructor. Maybe it lets the instructor convey emotions, to therefore highlight what's important about the content. That was one hypothesis, that is important. A different hypothesis was that students should really be focusing on the content, and that putting the instructor's face there was just a distraction, and we should take away this irrelevant moving, this instructor moving around, and just let the students focus on the content. You won't believe how many hours I and the other early MOOC pioneers spent debating this particular question. And we thought, well, with a MOOC, we can finally answer this question. We can send 20,000 students to student group A, send 20,000 students to student group B, and we can just see which group of students does better. So what's the answer? Should we put the instructor's face there or not? The answer is that, sadly, we still don't know. What happened was that the students in student group B complained vehemently that the video was too boring and they really needed the instructor's face. And so we had to terminate the experiment early and put everyone in student group A, which perhaps is actually one answer. As another example, as a perhaps more useful, more insightful example, here's another illustration of something that happened in one of our classes. So this actually happened in my class. But a very funny thing happened to me the first time I taught my machine learning class online. The funny thing that happened was I assigned a computer programming homework, and 2,000 students submitted exactly the same wrong answer. This is a plot of all the incorrect solutions submitted by students for a particular programming exercise, and the big red cross in the upper left-hand corner is the 2,000 nearly identical incorrect solutions. What we did was we looked at a small sample of 15 of these 2,000 incorrect solutions, and we found that every one of them, the students had exchanged the two steps of the mathematical algorithm. So instead of doing A and then B, every one of these incorrect 2,000 wrong answers did B and then A. What this allowed us to do was generate a custom error message so that when the 2001st student submitted the same wrong answer, we could pop up a custom error message that told the student, dear students, consider the order in which you're doing these two steps A and B. We found that this allows students to much more quickly get over the misconception and move on with the class. So if you think about it, if 2 out of 100 students had submitted the same wrong answer, like in a normal on-campus university class, you probably won't even notice. Instead, it's when 2,000 out of 100,000 students that submit the same wrong answer, that's what gives the instructor a very strong signal that there is something to be looked at here. So I think it's ironic that in order to create personalization, in order to create this very personalized experience for students of a custom error message that tells them exactly what they should look at next, in order to make that possible, what was needed was to teach a class with 100,000 students, because that's what gave us the data needed to make this highly personal experience possible. So, Benjamin Bloom wrote a highly cited seminal study in education titled The Two Signal Problem. What Benjamin Bloom argued or showed is that if you use a standard lecture as your method of content conveyor, then student performance will follow a standard bell-shaped Gaussian distribution like that shown on the left. What that means is that 50% of your students will perform above and 50% below some median level of performance, as denoted by the blue versus the black figure shown on the right. If you implement mastery learning, then student performance improves, or it shifts to the right by 1 standard deviation, or by 1 sigma. What this means is that now 84% of your students are performing above what was previously your median level of performance. If you can give each student an individual tutor, then student performance shifts by 2 standard deviations, or 2 sigma. What this means is that now 98% of your students are performing above what was previously your median level of performance. So won't it be nice if 98% of your students are performing above average? The reason Benjamin Bloom called this the two sigma problem is that we as a society today, we simply cannot afford to give each student an individual tutor. But I think that we could certainly afford to give each student a computer, and with mastery learning, this idea of allowing students to attempt to homework over and over until they get it right, so they have a firm foundation to build on before moving on. With mastery learning, which we can implement today, I hope to be able to achieve at least 1 sigma. And in the future, over time, with improved personalization that the data is enabling us to do, I hope that over time we'll be able to slowly push student performance out from 1 sigma out towards 2 sigma. A piece that I don't usually show, but because I know many of you are instructors, I thought I'd very briefly show you some of the instructor interfaces on the website to give you a sense of what the experience is like of creating an online course. Different instructors have different methods for recording a MOOC. This is a picture of me in my little recording studio recording the first MOOC that we launched out of Stanford. And so it's actually a fairly relaxing procedure. If some afternoon I feel like shooting a 10-minute video, I walk into the recording studio, I sit, maybe brush my hair, sit down, and start talking, speaking to the camera, and the tablet image, the image of what I'm drawing gets captured. My face also gets captured by the camera, and this is then edited together by a teaching assistant into a 10-minute video that goes on the website shortly after. This is just one format of recording that results in videos that look a lot like Khan Academy, for those of you familiar with that, with recording on a tablet, but sometimes also with the instructor's face. Our university partners have used many, many different video formats, including shooting lots in the field, talking head, having the instructor interview other people, but almost any form of video, including video with different animations to help make different points. So recording a video is time-consuming for instructors because of the pedagogical work you have to do. Beyond that, we also spent a lot of time designing easy-to-use interfaces on the website to help even non-technical instructors build courses. When you have a class with 100,000 students, it's not always easy to quickly get a sense of what all of your 100,000 students are doing. Because of that, we spent a lot of time building instructor dashboards that, to some extent, try to convey to you the status of your 100,000 students. Shown on the right is a dashboard that shows recent student activity in different parts of the class, so you can sort of get a sense of what the different students are up to. You can also get aggregate summaries of student behavior in your class. Our website also contains fairly easy to use interfaces to allow instructors to assemble a course. Shown here is our lecture, excuse me. Excuse me. Shown here is our section management interface, which is how instructors go to edit quizzes, to upload lecture videos, to send due dates, and so on. And it's all designed to be highly usable to non-technical instructors and teaching assistants as well. And finally, because of the community of universities we've built up, we routinely collect best practices from our university partners and assemble them on our website to share broadly with our university partners so that we can all learn from each other with the best practices in MOOC as we move forward into new medium of instruction. So far, I've been talking mainly about MOOCs, about massive open online courses. One question that I often get asked is, if anyone can go online to take a free Stanford class, why on earth would anyone still pay for a Stanford degree? I think the answer is that the real value of a Stanford education isn't just the content. Instead, is the interactions with the professors and the interactions with other equally bright students. To quote Plutarch, I think the mind is not a vessel that needs filling, but wood that needs igniting. And our job as professors is not to fill vessels, but to ignite minds. So, working with most of our university partners, what we're doing is assist them in creating more space for these rich interactions that I think is the real value of students attending these top universities. We are helping many of our university partners to implement what has come to be called the flipped classroom. What happens is, rather than having students come into the classroom to be lectured at by the instructor, we instead now ask students to watch the online content at home, where ironically the online content can be more interactive than sitting in a large lecture hall being lectured at for an hour. What this does is it now frees up the classroom time. That is, those precious 3 hours a week that the registrar gives us in the classroom. It frees up that classroom time for discussion and for much more interactive activities. So now, students watch the lectures at home, do some interactive quizzes and get immediate feedback, and they come into the classroom for small group problem solving, where they sit next to their best friends and work on problems. Or they come into the classroom to discuss research problems with the professor. Or they come into the classroom and for the weaker students get encouragement and extra mentoring from the professor. By creating much more space for peer-to-peer and student-to-instructor interactions in the classroom, I think we're making on-campus instruction much better as well. There are many pedagogical studies that support that these more interactive modes of engagement result in much better student outcomes. In this study done by Carl Wyman and others, it was shown that these more interactive modes of teaching result in much better student attendance, engagement, and learning. And this is not a 1 or 2% improvement. This is like a 30% improvement in student learning. So we're working with our university partners to generate these results as well for their on-campus students. Just to be clear, MOOCs today, Coursera content today, is being used to serve 2 different populations. The first population is the hundreds of thousands of students out there that otherwise would never have access to courses from these top universities. To them, previously, they had no access to Princeton, University of Melbourne, University of Edinburgh, EPFL non-EPFL classes, and to them we give free access to very good courses from these top universities. So we're clearly raising the access to education of these hundreds of thousands of students. The second population we serve is the much smaller group of, say, 50 students that attend Stanford or Princeton or Caltech. And to them, by helping the university implement the flipped classroom, we also improve the quality of education of this maybe smaller groups of students. And I think that we're improving the education of both populations is really important. Finally, just to wrap up, over the last year, I've traveled to quite a few countries and spoken with quite a lot of people about education. For those of you taking this call in Australia, I was in Australia just 2 months ago as well. I visited Brisbane, got to hold Koala, had a lot of fun. So I really regretted not being able, having to stay in the U.S. rather than being able to join those of you in Australia for this specific call. But I guess traveling to a lot of countries in U.S., Europe, Asia, and elsewhere, talked to a lot of people about education. And I guess I was surprised to find that even today, a lot of people still say that a great education should be reserved for the elite. I've been surprised to find that even today, a lot of people still say that a great education should be reserved for the privileged. But as a founder of Coursera, I say that a great education should be a fundamental human right. And with technology, we're now working to bring it to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. That was excellent. You saw there was lots of discussion and people are now starting to put their hand up to ask any questions. So if it's okay, we'll take some questions from those people who are putting their hand up. And also, if anyone wants to type in any questions, that's fine as well. We'll try and monitor that. So perhaps Bernard, if you would like to take the microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bernard, and I come from Rwanda, and I'm doing a PhD in the UK, University of Leicester, and I'm researching open educational resources and MOOCs for widening participation in higher education. So, and I want to ask a question, from what Andrew have finished with, Education for All, and he's saying that technology is enabling, taking education from the privileged only to everyone. But when you look at the statistics about internet access, only 1/3 of the population in the world have access to the internet, which means 2/3 do not have access to the internet. And when you look at MOOCs, like Coursera MOOCs, when you look at them, the materials are not openly licensed, so that people take them and reuse them and adapt them to take them to people who do not have access to the internet. So how will we be able to achieve education for all through technologies which is accessible only to 1/3 of the world population? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Let's see. At Coursera, we actually frequently think about the less privileged, those without great network access. It turns out this is an issue even in the United States, where in rural areas there are poor individuals without decent broadband. There are many high schools in the United States without decent broadband access, although obviously it's far worse in many developing economies than in the U.S. We hope that this will trickle down, and maybe I have two solutions to that. One is I find some of the work on inexpensive Android tablets very inspiring. So built in India, there is or will soon be an Android tablet that you can purchase for $20, or manufacturers for $40 with government subsidy. You can purchase for about $20, and we are designing a mobile application so that our contents will be accessible via very inexpensive mobile devices in the near future. And I hope that as governments get more of these very inexpensive devices into people's hands, this will give people more internet access. The other piece of it is that, previously, if you connect a rural village in a developing economy, what could they do? They could go online and read Wikipedia or something, which is pretty good. But now, if you connect someone up to the internet, they can now take the best courses from the best universities. So we're also working with some NGOs, some non-government organizations, that are using us as the excuse, or using us as the justification for investing more in broadband infrastructure. Because now, if you connect students to the network, they can now take these amazing courses. So those are fronts that we're pushing on, although I do completely acknowledge that our ability to help people without a good network access is very limited today.
Very much for that, Andrew. I'm just looking at some of the text questions that are coming in, and I thought I might go back to one that Kevin has put in, is how do we incentivize or motivate faculty to get on board with MOOCs, since it's time-consuming? So I think he's probably referring to the production of MOOCs as opposed to the use of MOOCs.
Yeah, right. So actually, that's a great question. I saw that question just now too. Is how do you incentivize faculty to produce more MOOCs? It is time-consuming for instructors to produce MOOCs, but it often takes instructors, maybe small hundreds of hours. So it is a lot of work to create one of these. But if you think about it, for the entire professional career of an instructor, teaching in the university for what, 30, 40 years, maybe you get to teach a couple thousand people, maybe a few thousand people, and that's over your entire professional career. Most of us, maybe all of us that became professors, most of us did so because we're very passionate about our subjects. We like to disseminate knowledge about our discipline, which we're very excited about. And it turns out that when you give a professor the technology to teach, not just 50 students at a time, but 50,000, the answer is often an enthusiastic yes. And moreover, many instructors are working with us also because they want to implement the flipped classroom for their on-campus classes as a way for improving the quality of education for their on-campus students as well. So I think creating a MOOC isn't for everyone, and it is a lot of work. I don't want to minimize that. But for those of us that have done it, certainly for myself and for pretty much almost all the instructors I've spoken with, most of us feel like, it was some of the most incredibly well-spent time.
Very much, Andrew. I saw another question here in the text about the time-based model for Coursera, and I guess that's an interesting question as well, about whether you just leave MOOCs open or whether you actually have structured activities that take place within a prescribed time. So I wonder whether you could just give us your thoughts on that from Coursera's perspective.
Sure. Let's see. I'm going to answer the question, and I hope I'm answering the right question. So our courses so far have a weekly sync-ups. So every week there are new lectures and new homework, and you usually have 1 week to watch the lectures and do the homework. For the most part, we have avoided having activities that happen at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Excuse me. And the reason for that is that we have students all around the world in every single time zone, and 9 a.m. for you will be 3 a.m. for someone else, which is why we've had only weekly sync-ups for the most part. One exception, maybe the main exception I know of, is that instructors have sometimes done live chats with a few students from around the world. So they've done Google Hangouts, a live video chat with, say, half a dozen, maybe a dozen students, and that's usually recorded and made available broadly. But that's the one exception where we then kind of need everyone to be, online at 9 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. But other than that, because of the time zones, and because many of our students are working professionals and have a full-time job or other commitments, we've been giving students flexibility within a week in terms of when they do their work.
Thanks, Andrew. Just looking at another one here about from Phil, which is about the types of learners, I guess, who participate in MOOCs and their ability to be able to participate in a constructive way, depending on whether they're experienced learners or whether they're novice learners. So I wonder whether you've got any comments on that.
Yeah, right. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. It is true that I think in these early days of MOOCs, most of the successful students tend to be experienced learners, because today, to complete a MOOC, requires a fair amount of self-discipline. This is also why the certificates are considered valuable, a very valuable signal by employers. I'm not sure I understood the question, though.
No, that's fine. Is there anyone else that wants to take the microphone and ask a question, or we just continue to look at the text-based ones? We've probably got about another couple of minutes, because I'm sure Andrew has meetings and other things that he needs to go. Diana, we'll hand the mic over to you.
Let me quickly take one to answer Diana's question. Maybe there was one asking, what is the cost and time for institutions to create MOOCs? So let me quickly answer that. Coursera works by partnership with universities. Our partnership model is that we offer at no cost to the university the tools, the technology, and the support to help universities create online content. The university is responsible for the cost of content production. That usually means the university has to pay for the faculty and the teaching assistant and maybe the videographer or instructional designer salaries. So the university is responsible for content production, and so the cost is the cost of the personnel to create the content. The university owns the intellectual property to any content it creates, but they upload it to Coursera and allow us to serve the content out to the public. And then finally, if and when Coursera brings in any revenue associated with content, for example, by charging for university branded certificates or by licensing content to someone else and so on, any revenue associated with, say, a University of Melbourne course, as one example, is then shared between the University of Melbourne and us to keep the whole effort sustainable. So revenue actually flows from us to our university partners.
Okay, Diana, sorry, just before we hand the mic over to you, Mathew, I wonder if you want to put up the link to the survey now. I think that might be the appropriate time, and then we'll hand the mic over to Diana. So please, Diana, go ahead.
Hi, I hope this is coming through all right. Well, it's great stuff, Andrew, and thank you very much for a fascinating talk. But I just wanted to pick up actually on what Phil's question was about the kinds of students who are in the MOOCs. At the moment, they are predominantly very experienced learners. And I think the point that Phil was making was that inexperienced learners need a lot of support. You've got 100,000 students. That's probably going to be something like 4,000 students at our current model of the way in which student support works in higher education. So don't we have to find some very clever technology devices for being able to gear up what a single tutor can do with an awful lot of students to give them the support they need?
Yes, and this is something I agree that students do better with support. So, for example, completion rates of courses at universities is much higher than completion rates of MOOCs. So we have there are three things I think are worth developing, I guess. One is that to students that cannot afford it, I think that this gives them great free access, so they're pretty much better off. But I do think that students do better with support, and so this is part of why we have recently we work with universities, which I think are amazing organizations for delivering this sort of support. So imagine if instead of just taking a MOOC by yourself, you have a community of learners to go hang out with, that you have a professor to talk to in the classroom. This is why we believe in the flipped classroom model and why we work with universities to offer courses in the flipped classroom format, because I think universities are set up amazingly well to provide some of that support. And then finally, for the online-only cases, the students that maybe cannot afford to attend a university for whatever reason, we are working on better technology. Some of these are sort of automated encouragement pieces, like gamification, where we show a student a progress bar. It turns out that showing a student a progress bar is a little bit encouraging, so they can see their own progress. We're also experimenting with online tutoring, where the idea is to find students in the class that have done well in an earlier version of the class, and to see if some of them can be tutors, maybe volunteer tutors or paid tutors, to help students in the next version of the class to help offer that sort of support. One benefit of this sort of having students tutor each other is that it's more scalable, and that might allow us to offer more support to a large number of students. So I think there is still work to be done here in terms of developing better technology to offer these sorts of tutoring services.
Did you want to take the microphone again?
sorry, I didn't hear your comments just now, but I see that we're running up against the end of the hour. So, and by the way, thank you everyone for the online chat comments. I've been sort of scanning through and reading all of your comments, even though I haven't managed to respond to all of these on this call. But maybe Mathew or Geoff, if we're running up against the end of the hour and should wrap up, maybe I should just take this opportunity to say to everyone in the audience, thank you very much, both for your questions and for your...
And Andrew, we just want to thank you very much for your time and generosity in giving us this presentation. As you can see from the number of questions that was asked, it's actually, it's obviously generated a huge amount of interest and sparked everybody, I think, to be very reflective about the type of education that we're offering. And you see a lot of the comments have been around the promise, I guess, that seems to be going with MOOCs about education for all and what that actually means in the current context. So, Andrew, thank you very much. This has been a great presentation in our webinar series. We really appreciate that. And just to remind everyone, if you wouldn't mind filling out the feedback, and if you could also let your colleagues know about this webinar as well. Mathew will be posting up the link to everyone who registered, and it'll also be on the Transforming Assessment website. So again, everyone will have access to this. So thank you very much, everyone, wherever you are in the world, and thank you to Andrea as well, with Andrew, for helping to organize it at the Stanford end. So Andrew, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, and goodbye, everyone.